So we've built, deployed, and debugged, to some degree, our first real-world application. Go over a quick review of some of the SDK commands that I mentioned again. Again, these are all well documented in the developer portal, developer.palm.com. Lots of docs, lots of forums, etc. But the highlights are, packaging, installing, running. Those are the commands: Palm package, Palm install, and Palm launch. Typically, though, as you're testing and debugging, you do that all together with just Palm run. And I actually have a typo. That should just be Palm run with the name of the directory. Some other things you can do with the actual device, which I can't show, obviously very easily remotely. I can actually Nova term into the device. So the nice thing about webOS is it's not a walled garden. It's very open, of course, being Linux-based. The devices are easy to get into developer mode. There's a simple key commands that you can enter, like in the Konami code that you can use to put it into developer mode, which means you can then do things like Nova term into the device, etc. You don't have to jailbreak it. You don't have to root the device. It's all opened up for you. And I can Novacom in, look at tail messages. I can look around in the actual file system, etc., and actually have basically a Linux terminal running. A few more things about samples, and for this, I'm going to show you some stuff about the SDK. So when you download and install the webOS 3.0 SDK, you get the emulator we've been looking at, you get Enyo, etc., but you also get a couple of other things. You get really nice docs and really nice sample code. Now the thing that's not nice is kind of the cryptic place that all this stuff gets installed if you take all the defaults. So you go to Program Files, HP WebOS, then there's two separate folders. There's PDK, which is the native stuff, and there's SDK, which is Enyo. Under here, there's Share, there's Ref Code, where you want to go. The framework itself, so if you drill down into the Enyo folder, here's the framework that I'm including via the Enyo.js file. And then underneath that is a source directory with all the source code for all of the different Enyo kinds that come with the framework. So what this means is, you can dig around and see how lists are implemented. You can see how buttons are implemented. So you can, use that for, if you want to use that for debugging, or you want to create your own kinds that look like things in Enyo using some of the source code, etc. You can go ahead and do that. Support directory. Support directory has all of the examples that come with the SDK, and they're in two folders. Examples is kind of like the more simple things, just showing how to use basic lists and so forth, controls, drag and drop, etc. And then there's more examples which have some more advanced stuff. So, for example, there's a just type sample application. If you're familiar with just type, that's the webOS universal search feature, where you can build an application and have it register basically a DB8 data store, such a way that the just type functionality lets you search in that application without running the app. There's multi-touch examples, etc. So I'm going to show you a couple of these just to give you an idea of what you can do with the sample code. So we'll go back into Chrome, and just for fun, I just did my favorite thing, which is to accidentally drag folder. No, I didn't. Good. Let's take a look at layouts, for example. And there's a sliding pane. And again, I'll just take the index.html file for this app and drop it into Chrome. Now we're talking. Now, this is a little bit more interesting than the UI stuff that I've been doing just up till now. Here's an example of using a multi-pane application. So it's sort of one main view with three panes. This looks kind of like what the email client or the calendar looks like. Same kind of UI model with the sliding panes. I can take these guys, I can drag them to resize, height them, etc. Move them around, type stuff, etc. So I have multi-pane. I can also do lists. Let me show you the quick list example. And a lot of people will use these examples. Virtual list. People will use these examples as the basis for real-world applications, which is totally great. data that's in a big gigantic JSON file here. There's probably 3,000 names and records and so forth in here. And this list is going to load this pretty quickly. I go into NYC HTML, say load data. It pulls up all the records that are in that JSON file. Now, the thing that's cool about a list, a virtual list, is it uses the flyweight concept. So it's only going to be loading and rendering the records that are actually visible on screen. So even though your data set may have 3,000 records, every one of those doesn't have to be rendered. It's only going to render on screen stuff that's actually visible as you scroll. So here again, I mean, you're going to build an application that's maybe, I don't know, an RSS reader or something like that, or a stock picker with lists of data. You could go into the SDK, grab these samples, and start gutting them and repurposing them for your actual applications. Another app in the SDK that's really, really handy, especially for UI work when you're not familiar with the entire suite of components and the whole setup and the whole library of UI controls. There's something in here called Style Matters. This is basically a browser of every UI component that Enyo supports. So it just loads up, takes a little while. There we go. What we've got here is a nice list that I can scroll through, or with samples of every UI control component in Enyo. So, for example, I'm going to look at what scrims look like. Scrim is, the kind of the transparent screen with a animated icon for when I, maybe loading a lot of data. Or what else? I could look at the dividers. So here's what dividers look like. Kind of stylized list with these nice, divider views. Things like pop-ups. How do I build a modal dialog if I want to? Here's one of the scrollable items in the modal dialog. So that's that. I can see that kind of thing. These scroll. There's a list of items with other components, etc. And the nice thing about all this is not only do I get to see what they look like, if I open up this pane that's part of the application. Oh, sorry. Get rid of that. I get the actual code that shows me how those individual components are implemented. Now, it's not the whole application, but it's here's how these buttons are built, or here's how a scrim is built, etc. And I can use that in my application, or I could dig into the actual Style Matters source code and start, gutting stuff out of there. So the point of all this is that the SDK, in addition to having the actual library, has got, I think, really, really good sample code for getting you started for your actual development. So before we move on, any other quick questions before I go to the next thing?
Nope, we're good. Very attentive audience.
Excellent. Okay, so that's more samples. Some other things that I'll just talk about briefly and then show kind of a more complex example of is using web services. So mobile applications, any web applications, mobile or otherwise, basically, this day and age, of course, everything is connected. We're talking cloud, we're talking social networking, mapping, whatever it might be. Your applications are always going to need to be able to access content from the internet, interact with REST APIs, other kinds of APIs that are feeding services that you're building. There's a kind in Enyo called web service, which basically makes AJAX development a snap. So if you've ever done this from scratch, in JavaScript, again, it's not terribly hard, but there is a fair amount of sort of, call it gratuitous, boilerplate code that you have to build. Depending on how you're doing it, your browser detection has to be there. Is my XHR object is it an ActiveX control if I'm in IE? Is it something else? JavaScript object if I'm somewhere else, etc. All that stuff has to get done. You have to create and clean up the actual XML HTTP request objects. Do all the response handling on ready state change, all that stuff. Now, of course, there's lots of libraries to make that simple for you, and and Enyo is no different. In Enyo, this is like a one-liner, and I'll show you some examples of that when I go through my next example. Basically, you create an instance of a kind called web service, There's a URL property, which points it to the service that you want to interact with. There's an on success and an on failure property that map to the actual success or fail method.